The dog didn't recognize her at first. That was the part that hurt the most. He stood at the end of the shelter corridor, ribs pressing softly against thinning fur. One ear folded the wrong way, like it had learned to listen for danger instead of joy. The air smelled like bleach and wet concrete, and somewhere a metal gate slammed, sharp as a warning shot. The little girl froze beside the doorway, her fingers curling into the sleeve of her jacket the way they used to curl into his fur when she was afraid of thunderstorms. 3 years had passed, but her body remembered before her mind could catch up. She whispered his name anyway. It came out broken, thinner than she expected, like it had aged with her. For a moment, nothing happened. His eyes skimmed past her, dull with the exhaustion of being passed over too many times. Her chest tightened. Maybe she was too late. Maybe love could expire if it waited long enough. Then his body shifted, just slightly. A pause, a breath held in the space between forgetting and remembering. His head tilted, trembling, as if a door inside him had cracked open, and something old and impossible was trying to come home. That morning began like it always did, with light slipping through the curtains in thin, hopeful lines and the sound of her dog's nails clicking against the floor as he followed her everywhere. The house still smelled faintly of toast and detergent, of ordinary life moving forward without asking permission. She had tied his leash herself, looping it the wrong way at first because her fingers were still small and clumsy. He had waited patiently, tail brushing the wall, eyes fixed on her face as if the whole day depended on her getting it right. Outside, the street was waking up slowly. A delivery truck coughed awake down the block. Someone's radio played an old song, too softly to recognize. Her dog pulled ahead, excited by a smell she couldn't see, and she laughed. The sound light and careless. It was the kind of laugh that doesn't know it's about to disappear. They stopped near the corner shop where the owner always slipped him a biscuit when no one was looking. Wang. She remembered the way his ears perked up, how his body leaned forward with trust, unafraid of the world. She let go of the leash for just a second to adjust her shoe. Just a second. The memory of that moment would later stretch into something endless, replaying itself with cruel precision. There was a noise then, sharp and sudden, like metal scraping metal. A car door, voices she didn't recognize. Her dog turned his head, curious, not alarmed. When she reached back for the leash, her hand closed around air. At first, she didn't panic. She looked around, confused, certain this was some kind of mistake. He had to be right there. He always was. She called his name once, softly, the way you do when you're sure the answer will come. Nothing answered back. The street felt wider suddenly, louder, like it had taken a step away from her. She ran. Her shoes slapped against the pavement, breath tearing in and out of her chest as she shouted his name again and again. People turned to look, their faces blurring past her. Curiosity without understanding. Somewhere in the distance a car engine revved, then faded. She didn't see him. She didn't see anything except the space where he should have been. When her mother arrived, breathless and pale, the world narrowed to the sound of adult voices trying not to sound afraid. Questions stacked on top of each other. Did you see anyone? Are you sure he didn't just run off? The words slid past her like rain. She stared at the empty leash still looped around her wrist, the weight of it unfamiliar and wrong. They spent the afternoon searching. They walked every street, knocked on doors, called his name until their voices went hoarse. Posters were printed and taped to poles with shaking hands. His picture smiled back from the paper, tongue out, eyes bright, like he was mocking them with how alive he looked there. Night fell without asking permission. Streetlights hummed on, casting long shadows that made every alley look dangerous. She sat on the curb while her mother spoke to a police officer who wrote things down slowly, as if careful handwriting could fix anything. The officer's voice was kind but distant. Dogs go missing, he said. Sometimes they turn up. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes they don't. At home, his bowl was still full. His blanket lay crumpled in the corner where he liked to sleep. She sat on the floor and pressed her face into it, breathing in the fading smell of him, afraid that if she didn't, it would disappear too. Her chest hurt in a way she didn't have words for. It felt like something had been pulled out of her without warning, leaving a hollow she couldn't see but could feel everywhere. Days passed, then weeks. Each morning she woke up listening for the sound of his paws, and each morning there was only silence. People stopped asking about him after a while. The posters peeled and fell down. Life, rude and unstoppable, kept going. But inside her, that day stayed frozen. The moment her hand closed around nothing became a permanent bruise. She learned too early that love could vanish without saying goodbye. And somewhere deep in her chest, a quiet promise took root, fragile but stubborn. If he was still breathing somewhere, if the world hadn't taken him completely, she would find him, even if it took years. Time did not heal the loss. It taught it how to behave. The girl grew taller in the way children do when grief lives in their bones, sudden and uneven, like the body is trying to outrun something it cannot name. Her shoes were replaced. Her school books changed. Her handwriting grew sharper, more deliberate. But the space beside her remained the same size, an absence shaped exactly like a dog who used to walk there. At first she talked about him constantly. She corrected people when they said, "Your dog," insisting on a "my dog," as if possession could anchor him back into the world. She slept with his collar under her pillow, the metal tag cool against her cheek. Its faint jingle, the last sound of him she could still summon. Some nights she dreamed he was scratching at the door, and she woke up already smiling, already reaching, only to meet the flat cruelty of morning. Adults tried to help in the way adults do. They softened their voices. They said things like, "Maybe he found a new family. Maybe he's happy somewhere else." The words landed wrong, like stones thrown gently but still thrown. Happiness without her was not comfort. It was betrayal, even if she knew, somewhere deep, that dogs didn't choose their disappearances. By the second year, people stopped bringing him up. Silence became the polite thing. She learned to swallow his name before it reached her mouth. When friends asked if she wanted a dog again, she shook her head too quickly. She didn't explain that loving another one felt like erasing him, like admitting he was replaceable. Some losses, she decided, had to be carried alone. Her parents watched her carefully, the way you watch a crack in the wall and hope it doesn't spread. They bought her books. They signed her up for activities. They filled the house with noise, as if sound itself could patch the quiet. But in the evenings, when the lights were low and the television murmured without conviction, her mother sometimes caught her staring at the front door, waiting for a shape that never came. Somewhere else, in a place she couldn't see, her dog was also learning new rules. He learned that hands did not always mean kindness, that food came unpredictably, sometimes tossed, sometimes withheld. He learned to sleep lightly, to keep one eye open, to flinch at sudden movements. The softness he once carried in his body thinned, replaced by a vigilance that sat heavy in his chest. The girl did not know these details, but she felt them anyway, like static in the air. On certain days, a tightness would settle in her throat for no clear reason. She would press her palm against her chest, confused by the ache, unaware that love stretched across distance, even when memory blurred. Birthdays came and went. Each year she made the same silent wish, blowing out candles with practiced calm. She stopped crying about him, which everyone mistook for healing. In truth, she had simply learned how to hold the pain without letting it spill. Grief became quieter, but it did not become smaller. One afternoon, years later, she found his old leash in the back of a closet while searching for something else. Dust puffed into the air as she lifted it, and for a moment she couldn't breathe. The fabric was faded now, frayed at the edges where he used to tug. She wrapped it around her wrist just once and stood there, feeling foolish and desperate and deeply, achingly loyal. She was older then, old enough to understand that the world did not bend itself around love. That bad things could happen without meaning. That endings did not always come with closure. Still, some part of her refused to let the story close. It waited. It listened. And so the years passed, not empty but incomplete. Life layered itself over the loss, school and laughter and small victories stacking on top of that first, invisible fracture. She learned how to smile without him. She learned how to walk home alone. She learned how to hurt quietly. But she never learned how to forget. It happened on a day that wasn't supposed to matter. The sky was the color of old paper, clouds pressed flat and low, threatening rain but never committing. She was scrolling without thinking, thumb moving out of habit more than intention, when the image stopped her. A blurry photo. A dog behind chain link fencing. The caption was short, careless even, the way strangers describe miracles without knowing it. Found dog. Male. Adult. Timid. No chip. Her heart reacted before her brain allowed it. A sharp, sudden pull like something inside her had been yanked toward the screen. She leaned closer, studying the angle of the ears, the slope of the muzzle, the familiar way one eye looked slightly more tired than the other. Logic rushed in fast defensive. It had been 3 years. Dogs changed. This could be any dog, but her hands were shaking. She showed her mother that evening, trying to sound calm, trying not to sound like a child chasing ghosts. Her mother stared at the screen longer than necessary, the way you do when you're afraid of giving hope a name. They didn't say much. They didn't need to. Some things move forward without permission. The drive to the shelter was quiet. Wind rattled against the windows, carrying the metallic smell of rain. The road stretched out, wet and dark, and every mile felt heavier than the last. She watched streetlights smear into long reflections on the glass, her reflection layered over the world outside. Older now, sharper, but still carrying the same waiting eyes. The shelter sat at the edge of town, a low building surrounded by gravel and chain-link fences. From the parking lot, she could already hear it. Barking layered over barking, a chorus of need and fear and endurance. The sound hit her in the chest. This was what almost sounded like. Inside, the air was cold and smelled aggressively clean, bleach trying and failing to erase despair. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, flattening everything they touched. A volunteer smiled kindly, asked routine questions, spoke in a voice trained to be gentle. The girl nodded, barely listening. Her focus was already down the corridor, where rows of cages stretched like a hallway of maybes. They walked slowly, too slowly. Each dog looked up as they passed, some hopeful, some tired, some barking like their voices were all they had left. She felt something like guilt bloom in her chest, sharp and immediate. Each pair of eyes felt like an accusation. You could be mine. You could save me. She wasn't ready to carry that weight. Halfway down the row, she felt it, that strange, unmistakable sense of nearing something important. Her steps slowed. Her breathing changed. And then she saw him. And then she saw him. He was thinner than she remembered. His fur had lost its shine, dulled by time and neglect. One ear bent at an odd angle, a small scar tracing the edge. He stood at the back of the cage, body tense, eyes scanning without landing anywhere. Not hopeful, not defeated, just guarded. Her chest tightened painfully. This was the part she had imagined 1,000 times. The moment of recognition, the rush of certainty. But certainty didn't come. Fear did. What if she was wrong? What if hope had tricked her into this room, just to humiliate her? Yeah. She stepped closer anyway, heart hammering loud enough she was sure everyone could hear it. She whispered his name under her breath, testing the sound, afraid of breaking it. He didn't react. The silence that followed was brutal. It pressed down on her ribs, made it hard to breathe. Maybe she had changed too much. Maybe 3 years was enough to erase a child's voice from a dog's memory. She felt something crack open inside her, old pain flooding back with terrifying ease. She crouched down, bringing herself to his level. The floor was cold through her jeans. She spoke again, softer this time, letting the name fall the way it used to when she called him home. Still nothing. His eyes passed over her like she wasn't there. Tears burned, unwelcome and embarrassing. She bit her lip, fighting the urge to apologize to a dog who didn't know her. The volunteer shifted uncomfortably behind them, already preparing gentle words, careful disappointment. And then, just as she began to stand, his body changed. It was subtle. A pause. A breath held too long. His head tilted slightly, as if he had heard something far away, something he wasn't sure he was allowed to remember. His ears twitched. His eyes narrowed, focusing for the first time. Her heart stopped. He took a step forward, then froze, trembling like the ground beneath him had become uncertain. She didn't move. She didn't breathe. She stayed exactly as she was, afraid that even hope could scare him away. Recognition didn't arrive like lightning. It came like dawn, slow, fragile, impossible to rush. But it came, and in that cold, echoing shelter, surrounded by cages and almost, something long lost began, carefully, to wake up. The moment stretched until it felt breakable. The shelter's noise fell away, replaced by the sound of her own pulse in her ears, a dull roaring that drowned out everything else. He stood there, halfway between the back of the cage and the door, muscles taut as wire, eyes locked onto her face like it held an answer he was afraid to ask. She stayed low, hands resting on her knees, afraid that reaching would undo whatever fragile bridge had begun to form. His breathing was shallow, visible in the slight rise and fall of his ribs. She noticed details she hadn't before, the way his paws were rougher now, the way his tail hung uncertainly instead of wagging freely. This was not the dog who used to barrel into her legs with reckless joy. This was someone who had learned caution the hard way. She whispered his name again. Not louder, not pleading, just the way she used to say it at night when the house was dark and he slept curled against her bed, listening even in his dreams. The sound seemed to land differently this time. His ears lifted fully, one crooked, one straight. His eyes softened just enough to let light in. A sound escaped him then. Not a bark, not a whine. Something smaller, broken. It scraped out of his chest like it had been waiting years for permission. His body leaned forward, tail giving a hesitant, almost embarrassed twitch, as if it wasn't sure joy was still allowed. Her breath hitched. Tears blurred her vision, turning the world into a watercolor of light and shadow. She laughed once, quietly, the sound shaking. It's me, she said, voice cracking around the words. I'm here. That was when he moved. He surged forward, paused, skidding slightly on the concrete, pressing his face against the bars as close as he could get. His tail wagged hard now, hitting the metal in frantic rhythm. His eyes shone, wide and wet, searching her face with desperate intensity, mapping it, confirming it, confirming it. She reached out before she could stop herself, fingers slipping through the gap to touch his muzzle. The contact shattered them both. He pressed into her hand like he had been starving for it, licking her fingers, whining softly, the sound vibrating through the metal and into her bones. His whole body shook, relief and disbelief colliding in messy waves. She cried openly now, forehead resting against the cool bars, whispering apologies she had carried for 3 years without knowing where to put them. I didn't stop looking, she said, even though he couldn't understand the words. He swore I didn't. The volunteer stood a few feet away, hands clasped tightly, eyes bright. She had seen reunions before, but this one felt different. This one hummed with history, with survival, with something that refused to die. When they opened the cage, he hesitated for just a fraction of a second, old lessons whispering warnings. Then he stepped out, slow and cautious, and pressed his body against the girl's legs, leaning into her like he used to, like home still lived there. Then she wrapped her arms around his neck, careful not to overwhelm him, burying her face in his fur. It smelled different now, dust and antiseptic and time, but beneath it, faint and stubborn, was him. He licked her tears, tail thumping wildly, as if trying to make up for every day they had lost. She felt his heartbeat under her palm, fast and strong and real, alive, against all odds, alive. The paperwork took time. Names were verified, old photos compared. The volunteer smiled through her explanations, voice thick with emotion she didn't bother hiding. The girl barely heard any of it. She sat on the floor beside him, one hand never leaving his side, afraid he might vanish again if she let go. When they finally walked out together, the sky had opened up. Rain fell in steady sheets, cool and clean, drenching the parking lot in silver. She laughed again, breathless as he stepped into the rain, blinking up at the sky like he had forgotten what it felt like. He shook himself hard, spraying water everywhere, then looked at her as if asking permission. She nodded, smiling through tears. He wagged his tail and shook again, freer this time. The leash felt different in her hand now, heavier. Right. As they walked to the car, he stayed close, bumping her leg with each step, grounding himself in her presence. She opened the door and waited patiently as he sniffed the seat, then climbed in, circling once before settling with a sigh that seemed to come from somewhere deep. She closed the door gently and rested her forehead against the window for a moment, rain tapping softly above her. 3 years. So much stolen, so much survived. Recognition, she realized, wasn't a single moment. It was a series of small, brave choices, a sound trusted, a memory accepted, a heart opening, even when it knew how badly it could hurt. As the car pulled away, she glanced back at the shelter one last time. He watched the world pass by through the window, eyes calm now, tail resting against the seat. And for the first time since that day, the leash went empty. The road ahead didn't feel like a reminder of what she had lost. It felt like a way home. The first night back was quieter than she expected. No celebration, no dramatic moment where everything snapped perfectly into place. Just a house holding its breath, learning a familiar shape all over again. The door closed behind them with a soft click, and he froze, body stiff, eyes darting as if waiting for something bad to follow. She noticed immediately. Of course she did. She moved slowly, narrating her actions the way you do around someone fragile, even when that someone has 4 legs and tired eyes. It's okay, she murmured, more to herself than to him. We're safe, Safe was a new word for both of them. He walked the house cautiously, nose low to the ground, sniffing corners like they might bite. The walls smelled different now, layered with years he hadn't lived. His old bed had been kept, washed and folded, tucked into a corner like a memory preserved in cotton. When he found it, he paused, staring down at it in confusion. Then he circled once, twice, slowly, as if asking permission from the past. Finally, he lay down, resting his chin on the edge, eyes never leaving her face. She sat on the floor across from him, arms wrapped around her knees, heart aching in a way that felt strangely good. Healing hurt like this, she realized. It stretched muscles you hadn't used in years. That night, neither of them slept much. Every time he shifted, she woke. Every time she moved, his ears twitched. At one point, just before dawn, he patted over and pressed his body against the side of her bed, letting out a long, shaky breath. She slid her hand down, fingers threading into his fur, and felt him relax inch by inch. The nightmares didn't disappear. Some nights he whimpered softly, legs twitching as if running from something invisible. She learned to wake him gently, whispering his name, reminding him where he was. Other nights, she woke with her heart racing, convinced she had lost him again. She would sit up, searching the dark until she felt his warm weight against her feet. They were both relearning trust. Walks were slow at first. He startled at loud noises, flinched when strangers reached out too quickly. She adjusted instinctively, stepping between him and the world, becoming smaller so he could feel bigger. The leash, once a symbol of loss, became something else entirely. A line of connection, a promise that this time she wouldn't let go. Neighbors noticed. Some recognized him, gasping softly, asking questions they didn't expect answers to. She smiled politely but kept moving. This story wasn't for everyone. It belonged to the quiet moments, the way his tail wagged a little harder each day. The way he began to sleep on his back again, belly exposed, vulnerability returning in increments. One afternoon, she found him in the yard, lying in a patch of sunlight, eyes closed, chest rising and falling in deep, even breaths. The sight stopped her cold. It felt sacred. Proof that safety could be relearned. That peace was not gone forever, just misplaced. She sat beside him and let the sun warm her face. For the first time in years, the ache in her chest softened into something gentler. Not erased, just changed. They were not the same as they had been before. She was older now, carrying knowledge she wished she didn't have. He was marked by experiences she could only imagine, but they fit together in a new way, shaped by survival instead of innocence. On the anniversary of the day he disappeared, she took him back to the street where it happened. The corner shop was still there. The pavement looked smaller than she remembered. She stood still, heart steady, and waited. He sniffed around, tail relaxed, then looked up at her, unconcerned. The past no longer owned them. They walked home slowly, side by side. That evening, as the house filled with the soft sounds of normal life, dishes clinking, a distant television, the quiet rhythm of breathing, she watched him curl up on his bed, completely at ease. His eyes fluttered closed. His body loosened. Home, it seemed, had finally settled into his bones. She reached for the leash hanging by the door, running her fingers along the worn fabric. It was no longer empty. It never would be again. And in the stillness, surrounded by the ordinary miracle of togetherness, she understood something simple and profound. Some love doesn't fade. It waits. And when it finally finds its way back, it knows exactly where it belongs.